Okay, so this video is going to be focused on gender within education for AQA Sociology A-level. So, where does the topic of education and gender appear? So that's going to be in paper 1, which is your education with theory and methods paper. And education is split up into 5 topics plus methods and context. We've got theoretical perspective, so you've got your functionalism, Marxism, all of those, gender, class, ethnicity, and educational policies. So for the gender, class, and ethnicity topics, they're all about differentials and achievement. So why do certain groups achieve less or more than other groups? And then obviously in today's video, we're going to be looking at gender. So have a look on my channel for other videos on those topics coming up. So breaking down the gender and education, in this video, I'm going to be splitting up into these topics. So I'm going to be looking at why do girls outperform boys, why do boys underachieve, in-school factors affecting achievement, and then also differences in subject choice. I'm going to be evaluating with feminist perspective, so that's liberal feminism and radical feminism, and then also the overall trend for gender in education is girls outperform boys. So the 2019 GCSE results show a 9.8% gender gap. So there's going to be a glossary at the end with all of this information in, and I'd recommend that as a good tool for learning and memorising the theories as we go through. And that's quite a key statistic that we will be using throughout. So to start, why do girls outperform boys? So as you can see, it's split up into shorter points with each theorist in bold. And again, there will be a glossary at the end with all those theorists on. So gender socialisation gives girls an initial advantage compared to boys. So Edmonds and David found that at home, parents allowed boys to be noisier and more attention-seeking than girls. So this means that by the time they started secondary school, boys often had trouble sitting still, concentrating, and that's a problem that girls less frequently encountered as they were socialised to be much more conforming and submissive. So therefore, they're much more prepared to get on with their schoolwork, meaning they went on to achieve higher grades than boys. So it's making sure that you're linking back at the end to actually why that means that girls perform better than boys rather than just the point. And then also you've got Mackin and McNally, so they acknowledge that changes to the exam system favoured girls, so more coursework meant that girls performed better as they were much more organised compared to boys who had much more of a last minute approach to assessment. And then also, it's quite an important point, so there's been a gender quake in the last 20 years, and that's a point made by Wilkinson, who coins the gender quake. And he argues that there's been profound changes in the expectations of women's futures compared to their mothers. So there's differences in women in the 21st century compared to in the 20th century. And now they're no longer restricted to family life or an expressive role, as functionalists might suggest. And they're much more committed to education and achieving their qualifications. So this means they're much more motivated, and therefore that's why they achieve more. And then looking at reasons for boys' underachievement, so why boys perform worse than girls, why they underachieve compared to girls. We've got Epstein, who blames schools for failing to cater for boys and their needs. So he argues that learning needs are often overlooked or ignored, and boys don't receive the support they need, and that's why they underperform. And then Mites and Brown, they support this by saying that teachers allow boys to be much more disruptive than girls. So Mites and Brown, they, again, as I said, they would support this. So for example, they might give boys extensions, teachers might give boys extensions compared to girls, and this means that if they're being much more relaxed giving extensions, boys don't go on to reach their full potentials, and therefore they underachieve. And then also we've got, there's less opportunity for men. So this links to the point of a crisis of masculinity, argued by Ragg. So the decline in the manufacturing sector has led to a decline in traditional masculine factory-based jobs and the crisis of masculinity. So, for example, the boys in Paul Willis's study, those jobs are the jobs that they might have went into are becoming much less common, which means it leads to lower prospects and lower aspirations for men. So pessimism about the world of work and job prospects filters down to even primary school boys, and this undermines their desire to work and their motivation, and therefore they underachieve. Okay, and now going on to in-school factors. So schools reinforce gender inequalities in wider society because teacher expectations and labelling leads to discrimination against females. So Spender, again another sociologist, carried out observation in schools and found that when boys were questioned by a teacher, they were often met with respect, whereas girls were criticised for being too assertive. So you can see the difference there. And then differences in subject choice. So Colley argues that families, peers, and gender stereotypes have an influence over subject choice. So that means that females are being steered away from traditionally male-dominated courses, particularly science, and we're going to come to that in a minute. So due to gender socialization, Edwards and Davis again, you can see that some of the sociologists do link to different points. So if you learn quite a few of them, you'll be able to use them in different areas and sometimes even cross-topic links. So they argue that boys are taught to be more practical and hands-on compared to girls, and they might have been introduced to toys such as cars or trains, and therefore they tend to gravitate towards more technical subjects such as science. And they're unlikely to choose subjects that fall outside of their gender domain. That's a good term to use as well, gender domain. And then a key statistic to use with this to support this as evidence is 80% of physics A-level students are actually male. So again, that's a good subject statistic to use, and I think you'll find with computer science as well, there's a similar statistic for that one. So now on to evaluating. So in terms of gender, we don't evaluate much in terms of functionalism, Marxism, because those theories don't necessarily have much to say about gender. So we look at feminism, and the way we split that up is into liberal feminists and radical feminists. There are also more if you'd like to see that as well. So if we start with liberal feminists, so they would be in favour of changing trends which show that girls outform boys in education, as that represents progress. You might say a march of progress view. So they celebrate that achievement. They suggest that the future is now female, so that's a good phrase to use as well. And that is only a matter of time before women move into politics and high-paid managerial work, roles at work. And then also you've got radical feminists, so they have a more negative view, as we know, compared to liberal. And they argue that girls outperforming boys doesn't equate to equality within the education system. They argue that the patriarchy still works through schools to reinform traditional gender norms which disadvantage girls. So the moral panic over boys' underachievement reflects the system, as there is greater emphasis on the success of boys. So what by that it means, if people are talking about why are girls outperforming boys, then that shows patriarchy, because there's more emphasis on why a boy is underachieving as to celebrating the achievement of girls. So that's what radical feminists would argue, that isn't celebrated. Instead, boys are being focused on, and they are being emphasised more than girls. So finally, we've got a few exam questions that you can try. So we've got 4 markers, 6 markers, and 10 markers. And then, so these are more short answer questions. There's also 30 markers in this topic, and there'll be a separate video on methods in context, research methods, and how to answer those questions. And then these are the glossaries, so if you'd like to take a screenshot, feel free to do that. And this is a way in which I'd recommend learning the different theories, perspectives, sociologists, key statistics, and just about really knowing, in terms of, for example, subject choice, differentials, what theorists, what sociologists, what theory will you go to for each of those headings. If you see a question on subject choice, will you go to Colley? Will you go to, which theory would you go to? So that's it for this video. Again, as I said, make sure you look out for other videos on other topics in education, and even crime and deviance and other topics in AQA Sociology A-level.